Well, as you know, WhatsApp is in the basis of your WhatsApp is text messaging. Yeah. So you have a WhatsApp group, and I send texts, they send texts to the group, and everybody could read them. That's the core of WhatsApp. Yeah. But to make it work, there are a few of what you might call add-ons, which work. Some of them work quite well. So the most useful add-on that I've used is the voice recording button. And that's super useful. It enables me to press the button, record my voice for about a minute, and then post that. And in fact, it seems to work very well, because what WhatsApp is, as I'm going to say later, a slow medium. So you send a text and you invite the others to answer, but invariably it takes a while before they answer back. So there's quite a lot of leading time. So in that time, there's enough time to record a 1-minute voice recording and post it. So I use that a lot. And not only do I post it, but I often ask them to post it. So I get them, for example, I've asked them a little game. I played the little warmer game, 3 Lies and 3 Truths, as an introduction, getting to know you game. I could post a little introduction about myself, ask them to text back the 3 Lies and 3 Truths. Okay, that's fine. And then I asked them all to, as many as possible, them to put up their own voice recordings. And then I asked other ones to listen to 1 or 2 of the voice recordings, and then put in comments what they thought were the lies and recordings. So with that little tool, you can actually create an interactive class using the voice recording.
I think that it's a lot of continuous professional development opportunities aren't as available in a lot of countries, especially outside of Europe. And obviously working at International House, we kind of have all the tech here. And so we're able to sort of utilize lots of different formats in our own personal CPD in the whole school. But, obviously teachers in countries like Nigeria or Mongolia, where English is certainly a big part of the curriculum, won't have anywhere near that type of access. And often the only thing they've got is things like WhatsApp. So, for example, at the moment, I'm running a course in a sub-Saharan African country where it's just not feasible to do it via Zoom because the internet connectivity there is not great. And also, at the moment, they're having sort of quite turbulent weather, so it just wouldn't work. So we do it via WhatsApp because it doesn't really require stable internet connection. So it sort of just means that the CPD and training opportunities can go beyond people who might, who have access to all that stuff anyway. Nigeria, teachers in Nigeria or the Congo, Indonesia might not be able to access that, but there's still lots of training opportunities there, of course.
Something I always recommend people to do if they're using WhatsApp to train is to download WhatsApp on their laptops. Because on the mobile phone, it can be a bit tricky to send files, but if you're using from your computer or your desktop, it's very easy to share files on WhatsApp. So if you've got PDF, video, or voice recording, that can be easily done very easily. It's very easy to share things with other people. And I think that's one of the greatest things about WhatsApp, because you can share different kinds of files, and everyone, at least from my experience in those countries, everyone uses WhatsApp. So it's different to Zoom, where sometimes people had never used Zoom before. These people they are familiar with WhatsApp. They use WhatsApp to talk to their families, friends. So it was good because they didn't need any training to use that kind of technology, which I think that was a big thing and really helped. It saved time.
Well, challenges, yeah, there are challenges. I mean, the main issue is feedback. So the way we teach, we don't usually just lecture at students. We want to basically have a conversation, a talk with them, and we also want to have pair work and group work, get them to work with each other. So I put in two challenges there. The first challenge is you as a teacher getting feedback from the participants, knowing what they understand and what they don't understand. Yes, we try to simulate that by asking them to text messages. So for example, I might put up 3 questions for them to consider. So I ask them to consider reading comprehension, how you arouse students' interest, what the stages are, things like that, and they text back their ideas. So I can get their ideas, but even so, it's difficult to check understanding in the way we would do in a face-to-face class and a Zoom class, because we'd be picking up signals from their faces and from their eyes and from their participation. So getting feedback as a teacher for me is probably the biggest challenge, which means I find it quite difficult to gauge the material to know whether it's useful or not. I mean, when I ask them, they're all very nice and they say, yes, this is wonderfully useful, but I don't know how much that's because they're being nice to the teacher and how much it really is useful. So that is probably actually the biggest challenge of this course, is I never really know to what extent what I'm teaching is really useful to them. And I think in a Zoom class, face-to-face or Zoom, it will be much easier to get that feedback as to what was useful and to check understanding and check online needs analysis. So that's probably the first big challenge. The second big challenge is of setting up some kind of group work. So in Zoom, we can set up breakout rooms, and that's very productive. Basically, as in a class of students, we want them all to speak. And in a teacher training situation, it enables them to say what they really think as opposed to what the teacher wants them to think, because they're talking to each other in a less stressful environment. And so it's that, I think, again, is part of my judging where their level is. It's much more difficult on WhatsApp because I'm not giving them a time to talk to each other without my interfering. And the other thing is, if in teacher training, I'm always wanting to demonstrate games and activities that they could use and they could then adapt. And to do that, I need to set up activities where they work with each other. And it's much more difficult to set up group work on a WhatsApp. It is possible, as I described before, using voice recording, but it's a challenge.
I think, first of all, download WhatsApp on your computer. And especially because one of the problems is when they have your WhatsApp, sometimes people will just message you at any time. And so my second tip would be for you as a trainer, turn off notifications, especially at the weekend, and be very clear, look, I will only respond to messages within these days or this time, because I personally didn't have many weird people WhatsApping me at 3 a.m, but I know some people, some colleagues who had problems because people were just always WhatsApping them at all time. They would never stop, and it became a bit of a problem sometimes. And my third tip would be patient, because we assume that people use WhatsApp as an instant messenger, but sometimes people, especially teachers, they're busy teaching, so you have to bear in mind that you have to send a message, but give people time to respond, and don't be upset if they don't, or if it takes a bit longer for them to respond.
I would say I was surprised by how well I was surprised by how well some of the activities worked, and that you can, it is very possible to do training via WhatsApp. It isn't ideal, of course, but it's nowhere near as kind of debilitating as I think people imagine. there is still quite a lot of room for engagement and interesting ideas. I do things like using voice notes as well and pictures, and so it can still be a very workable approach to training. And don't just write it off, because it is kind of, for a lot of teachers, it's probably the only way they can actually access these types of training programs.
Well, people talk about that. I haven't really had that as a major problem. I mean, it happened ironically last year when I was teaching on Zoom in India. It happened a lot, connectivity, but there hasn't seemed to have been so much of a problem of connectivity in WhatsApp. And of course, that's the advantage in a way, because teaching on WhatsApp is low bandwidth. So connectivity is much more likely to be maintained using WhatsApp than using a more bandwidth heavy medium. So on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, I mentioned that candidates, trainees tend to drop in and drop out. And when I asked them, they said they thought it was because they were multitasking. I mean, they said to me, that's the reality of our situation here. And I believe it, that most of the teachers that I'm working there are all probably very overstretched. They have problems of traffic and unpredictable work patterns. So I believe that. One or two of them said occasionally they couldn't attend because of connectivity, but I don't actually think that connectivity was the major problem. It was more the multitasking, I think. Although I mentioned some of the add-ons like Google Docs were difficult to use for connectivity. I mean, I've got a funny story of one of the teachers who told me, which I thought was sweet, Well, sweet maybe is not a word, but nice. Okay, so I'll read aloud what she said here. This is a teacher called Jami, who's a primary school teacher, teaching, I think, in northern Nigeria. And we were talking about reading, doing a reading comprehension. And so this is what she said. For the lower classes, before reading a comprehension, we pretend to be present at the location of the story. For example, she was doing a reading, a story about Santa that we did last year before the Christmas break. Now, these are teachers and children in Nigeria, which is a bit different from the place where Santa Claus lives. So I asked the pupils to imagine they were all living in a cold region, or that they had to travel to Iceland to see Santa. All of them screamed and shrieked, pretending to be cold, and also wrote about the gifts they would want Santa to give them. We did this exercise before I now read the story out to them, and we read it together. I thought that was a lovely story, she said.